The story opens on a brutal note. Envelopes scatter through the air and rain down on a quiet schoolgirl named Sami Oh, who remains standing as though this kind of humiliation was nothing new to her. It quickly becomes clear that another girl had deliberately bumped into her, sending her books and envelopes crashing to the floor. Although the culprit pretends it was an accident, her friends burst into laughter, openly mocking Sami as one of them deliberately steps on the fallen books. Nearby, another group of girls comments among themselves. One points out that the bullies come to school every day just to target Sami, while another admits she feels sorry for her because she has no friends. One of the girls who had been laughing turns towards Sami and questions why she would even bring such filthy things to school. Sami, however, does not respond and continues minding her own business. When someone remarks that she is not reacting at all, another girl explains mockingly that Sami is doing some kind of envelope folding job. The girls laugh again, ridiculing the idea of such work and passing by while continuing to insult her under their breath. Only after they leave does Sami quietly stand up and begin gathering the scattered envelopes. One girl briefly suggests helping her, but another reminds them that they have math class next, prompting complaints about how much they hate the subject. Left alone, Sami finishes picking up the envelopes, reinforcing the reality that she truly has no friends. Afterward, she sits back down, connects her earphones to her music player, and stretches her arms with renewed determination, telling herself to try again. Just as she is about to start the music, a sudden loud noise erupts from the boy seated next to her, startling her badly. Irritated, she starts her music anyway, her displeasure obvious while the boy casually pulls out his phone, which turns out to be the source of the noise. He scrolls through it sleepily, scratching his head and yawning as he wonders how long he had been asleep, apparently prompted by a message from someone named Chan. Meanwhile, Sami continues folding envelopes, her annoyance simmering beneath her calm exterior. Later that day, after school, the same boy wanders through a mart, debating what to eat. He pauses at the meat section but remembers having eaten it the night before. He then notices dumplings on sale and recalls that his father likes them, as there was only one left. As he reaches for the package, another hand snatches it away with surprising force. Shocked, he turns to see a girl clutching the dumplings triumphantly, as if she has just won a battle. Before he can react, an announcement echoes through the store, declaring that all frozen foods are now 10% off. Sami immediately rushes toward the checkout counter, excitedly asking the cashier to confirm whether the dumplings are included on the sale. When they are, she nearly squeals with joy. The boy remains frozen in place, staring after her as he slowly realizes that she might be in his class. That night at home, Sami carefully cuts and arranges the dumplings, counting them one by one until she reaches 10. As she stores them in the fridge, she decides she will only eat them on important days. Declaring that day to be one of those rare occasions, she laughs softly to herself and enjoys her meal with pure satisfaction. The following morning, already dressed for school, Sami collects trash along the roadside as she makes her way forward. She stops by her workplace, where she apologizes for a few faulty envelopes. Instead of scolding her, the supervisor reassures her and even praises her as the best worker there. After leaving, Sami picks up a fallen no parking sign and discarded placards, tossing trash into nearby bins as she continues on her way. A street sweeper notices her efforts and asks whether it is not tiring to pick up trash on the way to school. Sami replies that it is not difficult at all. The man reflects on how she never misses a day of doing this, a habit rare among children her age, and smiles quietly to himself. In class, Sami sits with her earphones in, staring intently at the envelopes in her hands and questioning whether one of them might be faulty. Beside her, the boy covertly watches her, covering his mouth as he confirms to himself that she is indeed the same girl from the mart. His attention is abruptly broken when someone calls his name, Pyojun, prompting him to quickly look away. The caller mentions that others are waiting at the gym, and Pyojun stands up and leaves with them, chatting as they exit. Later, in the restroom, Sami encounters the same three girls who constantly torment her. One crudely asks whether she came to relieve herself before going home, while another warns her not to mess up her makeup as they all laugh. Sami offers no response and simply walks past them. One of the girls speaks up at how she ignored them, whispering this observation to the others. The girl in the middle draws the group closer, her smile turning sly as she quietly suggests an idea. Moments later, as Sami prepares to use the toilet, she hears a sudden sound from above. Looking up, her eyes widen in shock as water pours down on her, soaking her completely. Outside the stall, the girls laugh as they walk away, with one expressing satisfaction at seeing her drenched and another boasting that she recorded everything. Inside, Sami remains motionless, her expression hollow and her eyes filled with pain. Then something clicks in her mind. She hurriedly checks her bag, urgently thinking about her side job. Relief floods her as she realizes the envelopes are unharmed. She squeezes the water from her hair, decides to leave her bag behind for safety, and uses the hand dryer to dry herself as best as she can. When she checks the time on her phone, her eyes widen in alarm. Grabbing her bag, she bolts out of the restroom at full speed. At the mart, Sami stood near the window, sweat clinging to her skin as she waited anxiously. When the announcement rang out that all the eggs included in the limited-time sale had already sold out, her strength seemed to leave her at once. She dropped heavily to the floor, releasing a long, exhausted breath. Moments later, she heard someone nearby remark that a certain customer was incredibly lucky, since that carton had been the very last one. Sami slowly lifted her head and saw a young man walking towards her, a carton of eggs held firmly in his hand. Around him, whispers spread, with people commenting on his good looks and even mistaking him for a celebrity. None of that registered to her. Her eyes remained fixed on the eggs, the same eggs she believed should have been hers. She lowered her gaze again, her disappointment weighing heavily on her, while the man continued on his way without noticing her at all. The next morning, in a completely different setting, an office buzzed with low murmurs as people sat gathered together. Several of them glanced toward a man addressed as Mr. Kim, quietly asking whether he had finally reached a decision. Mr. Kim cleared his throat before responding, first thanking everyone for making time to attend despite their busy schedules. He explained that he had called them together to announce the outcome regarding the late chairman's inheritance. Curiosity spread through the room almost instantly, with people wondering aloud who the final heir would be and whether a conclusion had truly been reached. Mr. Kim remained calm and assured them that they would be informed immediately. Back at school, the three girls who frequently targeted Sami were standing together, laughing as usual, when one of them suddenly doubled over, clutching her stomach in pain. She complained that she urgently needed to use the bathroom, while the other two laughed and told her they would go on ahead without her. Inside the restroom, the girl groaned, wondering if the egg toast she had eaten that morning had been spoiled, as her stomach churned painfully. Just as she was trying to steady herself, she heard a strange sound from above. When she looked up to see what it was, a sudden rush of water poured down onto her, soaking her completely. She screamed at the top of her lungs in shock and anger. Meanwhile, back in the office, Mr. Kim resumed speaking. He reminded everyone that the late chairman and his wife had left their entire inheritance to their only child, who was still underage. Because the heir was a minor, he explained, it was legally necessary to appoint a guardian or representative to manage the inheritance. That decision, he said, had been finalized that very day. The room erupted into murmurs once again until Mr. Kim sharply instructed everyone to remain quiet. He then announced that he would first reveal the identity of the heir, and without hesitation, he displayed a photograph for everyone to see. The name attached to the image was Sami Oh. Back in the restroom, the drenched girl continued screaming, hurling curses and threatening whoever was responsible for humiliating her. Outside the stall, Sami calmly set the empty bucket down, her movements unhurried as a small, satisfied smile crossed her face as she walked. At home, Sami stood in the kitchen, gripping the pot in her hands as irritation simmered beneath the surface. Her thoughts circled around the eggs on sale that she had waited weeks to buy, now gone. At the same time, she tried to steady herself with the belief that the bully would never know it was her, since no one had been inside the bathroom. That thought lingered until something else struck her mind, sharp and sudden. She remembered the promise she had made. She stayed frozen for a moment, then slowly lifted the snack she had just finished making, her expression firm with fierce resolve. She apologized out loud, vowing that she would never do something like that again. After placing the snack neatly on a plate and sprinkling sugar over it, she felt a small sense of relief when she saw how crispy it turned out. She packed it into a nylon bag and picked up the electricity bill along with it. As she rechecked the bill while crunching on the snack, her jaw tightened. The numbers did not make sense. Something was wrong. To save on electricity and water, she had long stopped using the washing machine and did her laundry manually. She rarely turned on the lights, used only one plate when she ate, and even skipped showers on her days off. She scrimped and saved wherever she could, so the amount written on the bill made her chest burn with frustration. Her hand trembled as she stared at it, and she finally yelled in anger, slamming the bill onto the table. Turning away, she lowered her head in sadness, wondering if she had been too greedy when she decided to take that place. Elsewhere, at Pyojin's house, the morning unfolded in complete disorder. His father shouted for his socks, and after being told where to find them, rushed out in a panic. Pyojin tried to offer him breakfast, but his father insisted he was already late. When Pyojin mentioned the sandwich he had prepared, his father grabbed it quickly, thanked him, and disappeared out the door. Left alone, Pyojin calmly finished his own meal, stored the leftovers in the fridge, cleaned the bathroom, straightened the bed, and neatly arranged his school bag before putting on his uniform and heading out. Outside on the street, a loud voice echoed as someone promoted a massive sale at BB Mart, advertising discounts of up to 40%. Some passersby laughed as they took the flyers, while others complained and threatened to throw them away. One person, however, picked one up and lit up with excitement after reading it. Among those who stopped were Sami and Pyojin, both staring silently at the flyer. The announcer continued enthusiastically, adding that it was a buy one, get one free event and urging no one to miss out. At school, whispers followed Sami as she ran across the field. The girl who had been soaked in the bathroom insisted that Sami had to be the culprit, while another dismissed the idea, claiming Sami was too much of a loser to dare something like that. Yet as they watched her sprint with an intense, unyielding expression, doubt crept in. One wondered why she trained so hard during breaks, while another remarked on how focused she looked. Meanwhile, Sami kept running, pushing herself without slowing. In her mind, she reminded herself of the goal she was chasing. With exactly 2,410 steps left to reach her reward through the walking app, she told herself she only needed to endure a little longer. She had to keep saving, no matter what. After finishing her run and changing back into her uniform, Sami immediately turned her attention to her phone. She refreshed the quiz page repeatedly, fixated on the event where she could win a tuna set. If she managed that, she reasoned, she could finally get toothpaste without spending extra money. She checked her balance again. 7,210 won. That was all she had left after paying the maintenance bill. Her face scrunched up at the number. Then her mood shifted. She reminded herself that she was getting paid for her side job that day. Excitement bubbled up instantly, and her thoughts leapt straight to sizzling pork belly. She imagined herself working hard and rewarding that effort with meat, especially with the massive market sale happening later. The image alone was enough to lift her spirits. That optimism shattered the moment she heard unfamiliar voices approaching. She lifted her head, and recognition struck so sharply that her body reacted before her mind did. She turned around at once, freezing in place. The group passing by drew attention, and nearby students whispered among themselves, wondering who the person walking with the chairman was, joking that the chairman looked almost subservient. Sami stood stiffly, her hands fidgeting. In her head, she called the chairman Uncle, panic flooding her chest. She wondered if he was there because of her, and worse, whether he had already seen her. Her legs refused to move. Acting on pure instinct, she grabbed onto a passerby, apologizing hurriedly as she did. Leaning in, she whispered a frantic request to hold on for just a moment. The group walked past. As they moved a little farther away, Sami tightened her grip without realizing it. Then the person she was holding spoke, their voice flat and cold enough to sting. That was when she realized it was Pyojin. She recoiled instantly, stepping back so fast it was almost a stumble. She apologized over and over, claiming dizziness, then noticed how badly she had wrinkled his shirt. Embarrassment burned through her as she worried about what she might have done. Pyojin only glanced down, smoothed his shirt, and dismissed it as nothing before walking away. Sami stood there, stunned, watching him leave. When his friends stopped him and they began talking, she remained rooted to the spot, quietly repeating to herself that everything was fine, even though her heart refused to calm down. After school, she headed straight to her part-time job. When she received her payment, she bowed repeatedly as her boss told her they were looking forward to her work that month. She thanked them sincerely before stepping outside. The moment she was alone, her restraint vanished. She jumped in place, squealing with joy, declaring it was finally time for meat after all her effort. She kissed the money in her hands, grinning at it like it was treasure. That joy lasted only a second. A sudden force yanked the cash from her grasp. A cyclist sped past her, money in hand, disappearing down the street before she could even react. Sami stood there, frozen, her expression completely blank. After all the hard work, all the saving, and all the dreams of a simple meal, everything was gone. She didn't chase. She didn't scream. She just stood there for a long, long time. Later that evening, at Pyojun's house, he headed toward his room when his gaze drifted to his hand. It was the same one Sami had grabbed earlier. A faint bruise was already forming. He paused, staring at it quietly, wondering if it was really bruising after all. At the police station, the officers spoke in low, restrained voices. One of them explained that Sami had reported being unable to see the rider's face or the license plate during the theft. When the officer who appeared to be in charge asked whether the nearby security cameras had been checked, the response was discouraging. None of the footage clearly captured the plate number from any angle. Both officers then turned toward Sami. She sat there looking drained, as though she might collapse at any moment. They gently told her to go home and assured her that they would contact her if anything turned up. Back at her apartment, Sami struggled at the door. The passcode kept registering as incorrect, the lock vibrating again and again as if rejecting her entirely. It took several attempts before she finally managed to get inside. Once in, she collapsed onto her bed, her face blank and unnaturally pale. She lay there for a long time before the tears finally came. When they did, they came all at once. She cried until her body jolted upright, sobs shaking her shoulders. Through her tears, she blamed herself. She told herself she deserved it, that she should have hidden the envelope money instead of carrying it around so openly. Over and over, she repeated that it was her fault. Eventually, the crying subsided. She wiped her eyes and forced herself to think clearly. The money was gone, and there was no point hoping it would be recovered. What mattered now was figuring out how to move forward. The following day, she went straight to her part-time job and shocked her boss by asking to take on every remaining task. She pushed herself relentlessly, convincing herself she could work 3 times harder than before. Later, she found herself at a restaurant asking for leftovers. The staff told her she could eat more if she wanted. To Sami, breakfast had become a luxury, so she ate quickly, ignoring the surprised looks from others. Free food was not something she could afford to waste. At school, she plugged in her earphones, her expression hardened with determination. It was time to work. She folded envelopes at an intense speed, barely noticing the laughter and carefree chatter around her. While others enjoyed their breaks, she kept going until exhaustion finally caught up with her and she nodded off. She jolted awake sometime later, startled and embarrassed. As she hurriedly wiped her mouth, her arm knocked into the stack of envelopes, sending them scattering across the floor. Pyojun, who had been about to sit down, paused and offered to help. As he picked up the envelopes, he instinctively glanced at her face and froze. Sami must have looked ridiculous because he quietly gathered the fallen envelopes and placed them back on her desk. She thanked him, confused by his expression. Instead of replying, he pulled out his phone, opened the camera, and showed it to her. At first, she didn't understand. Then she saw her reflection and screamed in shock, clutching her head. Her face was a complete mess, covered in writing she hadn't even noticed. Outside, she scrubbed her face furiously at the sink, but no matter how hard she washed, the markings refused to fade. Frustration crept in as she wondered what kind of pen had been used. Then another thought surfaced. Did the girl she had splashed know it was her? With a defeated sigh, she bent down again, determined to keep trying. Surely it would come off eventually. That was when a voice calmly told her it wouldn't wash off with water alone. She turned off the tap and looked up to see a boy named Chan-yu. He casually suggested it might be a permanent marker. When she asked who he was, he didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached into his pocket and pulled out sunscreen, explaining that he'd seen online that it could remove marker stains. Sami took it and tried it immediately. When the marks began to fade, she squealed in excitement. Chan leaned in to check, standing far closer than she expected, and quietly confirmed that it was gone. He lingered a moment longer, adding offhandedly that she looked pretty. Before she could even process that comment, someone called out to him. Chan looked up, revealing the voice belonged to Pyojun, who asked what he was doing there since they were supposed to meet in the clubroom. Chan apologized at once, waved goodbye to Sami, and hurried off. As she watched him leave, Sammy realized he had forgotten his sunscreen. She smiled to herself, thinking that he seemed like a genuinely kind kid. Later that evening, back in her apartment, Sammy placed a bowl of plain white rice in front of her and stared at it for a long moment. Her eyes drifted toward the freezer where the dumplings were stored. She badly wanted to take some out. Eating plain rice like this felt almost unbearable. But she caught herself just in time and scolded her own thoughts. She reminded herself that she had no right to complain after being so careless. Tightening her resolve, she dug into the rice, telling herself she should be grateful she even had food. If needed, she could always add a little salt. Just as she tried to swallow the rice in one go, the doorbell rang. She sighed heavily, annoyed at the timing. Of all moments, someone had to come when she was forcing herself to eat plain rice. Dragging her feet, she opened the door and found a woman holding a plate of kimchi. The woman introduced herself as her neighbor and explained that she wanted to share it with her. Sammy froze, then gasped as if she had seen an angel. Overwhelmed, she dropped to her knees and bowed deeply, thanking the woman over and over again. The neighbor was taken aback by the reaction and hurriedly tried to reassure her that it was nothing. Sammy accepted the kimchi with trembling hands, still bowing repeatedly, while the woman laughed awkwardly and bowed back before leaving. As the neighbor walked away, she smiled to herself, thinking that the girl next door was unusually fascinating. When someone called out to her, she turned and responded warmly, addressing the person as her son. It was Chan-yu, and she casually asked if he had just gotten home. Inside Sammy's apartment, the atmosphere completely changed. She ate the kimchi with pure joy, savoring every bite as if it were a feast. The following day at school, lunchtime approached after the students finished their practicals. The teacher reminded everyone to clean the science lab before leaving, prompting loud groans throughout the room. As the teacher was about assigning groups to clean up the laboratory, the girl who had been drenched in the bathroom suddenly claimed that Sammy had volunteered to clean everything by herself. The room fell silent as all eyes turned toward Sammy. Confusion and whispers spread. Some students insisted they never heard her say that, while others looked relieved. Before Sammy could react, the bullies waved everyone out dismissively. As the students left, the girls shot her smug looks, clearly pleased. Soon, Sammy was left alone in the lab. She lowered her head, feeling the familiar weight of isolation until she spotted a lone 101 coin on the floor. She bent down to pick it up, and just as she was about to straighten up, the sliding door opened and someone mentioned that it would only take a minute. When the newcomers stepped inside, she recognized Chan-yu immediately. He questioned why he had been brought there, sounding genuinely confused. The girl with him turned suddenly and bluntly asked if he had a girlfriend. The question clearly caught him off guard. He asked why she would ask something like that out of nowhere, but she insisted on an answer. When he denied having one, she blushed and pressed further, asking what he thought of her. From her corner, Sammy let out a tired sigh. She had seen this scene far too many times and already knew how it would end. As Chan-yu began apologizing, she leaned against her knees, unsurprised. Then the situation took an unexpected turn. Chan-yu calmly explained that he wasn't interested in women. The girl froze, then demanded clarification. As the meaning sank in, her expression twisted in disbelief, and she angrily accused him of mocking her. She shouted that he didn't need to say something so absurd just to reject her, and stormed out, slamming the door behind her. Chan-yu remained where he was, showing little reaction, until a sudden noise nearby made him flinch. He turned and noticed Sammy standing up awkwardly. She quickly apologized, explaining that she hadn't meant to eavesdrop and that she had been there first. He recognized her as the girl from the previous day. She approached him, returning the sunscreen and thanking him again, but he brushed it off, saying she didn't need to give it back. He smiled easily, remarking that he was just glad she managed to erase the markings on her face. Sammy responded flatly, remarking that what had just happened hadn't left a great impression. She turned away to focus on cleaning the lab equipment, insisting it wasn't her business. Chan-yu stopped her and clarified that he had been serious earlier. She paused and asked, with a hint of sarcasm, whether he meant what he said about not liking women. He confirmed it without hesitation. When she turned back toward him, wide-eyed, she found him smiling brightly as he openly reaffirmed that he was interested in men. Sammy continued to stare at him, her eyes wide with disbelief. She seemed to be waiting for him to take back what he had said or explain himself further, but he did neither. The silence unsettled her. Abruptly, she turned away and burst out, questioning how he could say something like that so casually, especially to someone he barely knew. She hurried to clarify that she was not accusing him of saying anything wrong, but she emphasized that he had no idea who she was, and the world was not made up of only kind people. Trust, she implied, was not something that should be given so easily. Throughout her outburst, he simply watched her, his expression unreadable. When she finally paused, he reacted in a way she did not expect. A small smirk appeared on his face, and he calmly stated that he liked her. The words caught her completely off guard. She spun back to face him, visibly startled, silently demanding an explanation. Instead of elaborating, he broke into a wide smile and suggested that they should be friends. The simplicity of it left her momentarily speechless. Later, in class, Sami tried to focus on something more tangible. She placed the coin she had found earlier on a piece of paper and wrote a short note asking whoever had lost the money in the science lab to take it. Even as she worked, her thoughts drifted back to what had happened earlier. The word friend lingered in her mind longer than she expected. It was a necessity at one point in her life. As she struggled to tape the note to the desk, she clumsily used her mouth to tear the tape. She pulled too hard, and the tape slipped from her fingers, flying across the room. To her horror, it landed squarely on someone's head. It was Pyojun. She froze in shock as he rubbed his head, clearly irritated before slowly turning toward her with a sharp, unimpressed glare. Embarrassment washed over her, and she hurriedly apologized, nervously blurting out complaints about her own bad luck as if asking the room why the tape had chosen him. When Pyojun suddenly stood up, Sami instinctively flinched, bracing herself for his anger. Instead, he calmly walked over, placed the tape back on her desk without a word, and walked away. She watched him as he left, confusion settling in. She had expected irritation or even scolding, but while he did not look angry, he did not look kind either. The interaction left her uneasy. Later that day at her part-time job, Sami finally explained everything that had happened to her. Her boss listened quietly and responded by telling her that she should have spoken up sooner. Not long after, Sami found herself standing outside, clutching an envelope tightly against her chest, her eyes stinging with tears. She could hardly believe that her boss had given her an advance and had done so without hesitation. Overwhelmed by gratitude, she silently promised herself that she would never forget that kindness. Suddenly, a familiar sense of fear crept in. She turned around sharply, scanning her surroundings with caution, as though expecting danger to emerge from the shadow. With quick, careful movements, she secured the money properly this time. She reminded herself that she could not afford to be careless again. This time, she would be smarter. This time, she would make it to the sale without losing everything. At the mart, Sami's eyes sparkled with excitement as she stepped into the brightly lit store. She turned slowly, taking in the endless aisles filled with discounted goods. Suddenly, she dropped the basket in her hand and exclaimed loudly that this was heaven, drawing confused stares from other shoppers. Lowering her voice, she pressed her lips together thoughtfully. Everything in the store was half off, but only if she found someone to share the deal with. She needed a partner. Pacing between aisles, she wondered if she could ask someone from her side job to join her. Just then, she froze. Ahead of her stood Pyojun. Her eyes widened in surprise. As if sensing her gaze, he turned around. Instinctively, she ducked behind a shelf, peeking carefully as he looked in her direction. When he turned away, she followed him quietly, observing that he was picking out the exact same things she wanted, each item part of the 2-for-1 deal. It would be perfect if they could split the costs. Her thoughts were interrupted when a child dashed past her, yelling for ice cream. The boy bumped into her, sending her stumbling into a nearby shelf. She looked up just in time to see a bottle wobbling precariously on the edge. Before she could react, a hand reached out and steadied it. Her eyes widened as she looked up. It was Pyojun. He turned to face her, his expression unreadable, and asked if she had something to say. Nervously fidgeting, Sami hesitated, wondering if he had noticed her following him. Then, gathering her courage, she pointed at a nearby sale poster and explained with determination that if they bought their items together, everything would be half off. He stared at her for a moment, clearly debating whether to agree or not. Later, outside the store, Sami's face was puffed up from excitement as she proudly held her shopping bags. The deal had worked. Pyojun, however, didn't say a word. He simply walked away. Watching his retreating figure, Sammy grinned and gave him a silent thumbs up. To her, he seemed like such a decent person, and she could barely contain her joy as she headed home with her discounted treasures. Meanwhile, at Pyojun's house, his father looked over the pile of groceries in confusion. He reminded his son that he had only gone out to buy soy sauce and asked why he had brought back so much. Pyojun merely replied that his father was home earlier than usual. His father explained that there was no overtime that night, then looked at the bags again, asking whether they didn't already have most of those items at home. Just as Pyojun was about to retreat into his room, he turned and said calmly that there had been a sale. His father raised an eyebrow and asked what kind of sale it was. Pyojun, with the same blank tone, replied that it was a 2-for-1 sale. Back at Sammy's place, she climbed the stairs to her apartment, humming softly to herself. Today, she decided, would be a dumpling day. But she quickly reminded herself that she still had to work hard to pay back the advance her boss had given her. As she neared her door, a faint unease settled over her. She heard footsteps behind her, steady, deliberate. Someone was following her. Her pulse quickened. The person was also going in the same direction as she was. Panic welled up inside her. She dug through her shopping bag, searching for something, anything to defend herself. Her thoughts raced. Could it be someone sent by her family? She had told them countless times not to worry about her. Her fingers brushed against something round, and she pulled out an onion, gripping it tightly like a weapon. She spun around, ready to confront the stranger, only to freeze. The onion slipped from her hand and rolled across the floor as her eyes widened in shock. It wasn't who she expected at all. The onion rolled across the floor, and the person who had been following her bent down to pick it up. It turned out to be Chanyu. He looked genuinely delighted as he handed it back to her, asking if she lived there. Sammy answered that she did, and he immediately mentioned that he had heard someone moved in about 6 months earlier, never imagining it would be her. He casually pointed toward a door across the hall and explained that he lived right there. Sammy gasped in disbelief. So he was the angel's son after all. Chanyu wondered aloud why they had never run into each other before. Sammy explained that she left for school very early and usually came back late. He laughed lightly, saying that explained it, then added with clear enthusiasm that it was great they were neighbors. Sammy, however, turned away, her expression dull and unreadable. When he suggested waking up earlier so they could go to school together, she quickly told him it wasn't necessary. Still smiling, he said he was sure they would become even better friends. Sammy stared at him, silently wondering why he seemed to shine so brightly. Was it really just because he was the angel's son? Inside her apartment, she spread out the groceries she had bought and stared down at them, her eyes lighting up again. Kim Pyojun, she realized, had been far more pivotal to her day than she initially thought. Elsewhere, a tense conversation was taking place. Someone questioned why Sammy had to abandon such wealth to live on her own. Another corrected them, explaining that she hadn't truly abandoned it. Her legal representative, who was also her uncle, was managing everything for now, and it would eventually be hers. There were 3 of them, 2 men and a woman. The woman scoffed, asking what would happen if Sammy's temper was never fixed, adding that it wasn't as if they could lock her up. Silence followed, heavy and uncomfortable, until the woman and one of the men suddenly broke down in tears. Between sobs, they worried aloud about whether Sammy was eating properly and taking care of herself. The woman recalled sending food by jet once, only for it to cause trouble. The other man stood there helplessly as they cried, murmuring that Sammy had to be fed somehow. The woman asked how that was even possible. The next day at school, confusion spread through the kitchen as students and staff wondered where the usual cafeteria ladies were. Outside, a notice board displayed the day's menu, an all-you-can-eat Korean beefsteak lunch, marked with a bold ++1. Students froze in shock and disbelief. Unlimited steak for lunch made no sense. Still, once they saw the food already being served, they rushed to line up. Sammy, however, remained still, staring at the board with suspicion. Every chef affiliated with the company was present, which only deepened her doubts. When she finally received her plate and sat down, she couldn't deny that the food looked incredible. Around her, students snapped photos and whispered excitedly about how good everything tasted. By the time lunch ended, Sammy walked out of the cafeteria with a very full stomach, letting out an unrestrained burp. Nearby students joked that their school lunch had made headlines. Sami simply held her stomach. She had already figured out what was going on, but chose to let it slide. After all, she had eaten 4 servings. Somewhere else, the man and woman behind the plan watched in satisfaction, thrilled that it had worked exactly as intended. As Sami reached the entrance, she unexpectedly ran into Pyojun. The two of them paused, simply staring at each other for a brief moment. Then Sami reached for the door, opened it, and gestured for him to go in first. Pyojun didn't move or even blink, continuing to look at her in silence. Growing awkward, she raised her thumb in an exaggerated thumbs up, urging him to enter. Before either of them could react further, a teacher's voice called out behind them. When they turned, the teacher asked both of them to help with something. Not long after, they found themselves in the teacher's office, facing a table piled high with books. The teacher explained hurriedly that there was an urgent meeting and asked them to arrange the books in alphabetical order. As he rushed out, he casually promised to buy them sodas another time, leaving the 2 students staring after him in silence. For a moment, neither spoke. Then they both talked at the same time. Pyojun saying he would start from the front, while Sami said she would take the back. Without another word, they got to work. As Sami reached for a label, her pen slipped from her fingers and rolled under the table. Pyojun, who had just picked up a book to label, glanced over and noticed her lying flat on the floor, stretching her arm under the table in determined silence. He straightened and asked what she was doing. She explained that she had dropped her pen and that it had rolled too far back. When he offered to help, she quickly insisted that it was fine. After a moment, she raised her hand triumphantly, announcing that she had finally found it. Seeing the dust clinging to the pen, she began blowing on it frantically. At that moment, Pyojun stepped closer and gently brushed some dust from her hair. The surprise was clear on her face. She hadn't expected him to do that at all. She stood up quickly, awkwardly dusting herself off, and thanked him. Pyojun simply reminded her that the bell would ring soon and suggested they hurry and finish up. Later that day, Pyojun walked home with Chanyu, each of them holding a can of soda. Chanyu casually asked whether Pyojun had been alone in the library during the break. Pyojun replied that he had been with Sami, adding that Chanyu should already know her since he had seen them together before. Chanyu smiled and mentioned that Sami lived right across the hall from him. Pyojun responded with mild surprise, questioning whether that was really true. Chanyu explained that he hadn't known anyone lived there until he ran into her recently, adding that he was glad it turned out to be her, because he genuinely liked her. When Pyojun asked if he truly meant that, Chanyu confirmed it without hesitation. Just then, a bicycle sped past them and clipped Chanyu. His soda can flew into the air as he lost his balance and nearly fell. Pyojun reacted instantly, catching him before he hit the ground. Chanyu glanced down, suddenly aware of how close they were, and a shy smile spread across his face. A sound broke the moment, and Pyojun quickly helped him stand properly again. Standing right in front of them was Sami, holding up a trash can like a trophy, her gaze fixed intently on the two of them. Chanyu called out to Sami, remarking that what she had just done was impressive, and asking how she managed to catch a flying can midair. Sami responded casually by dropping the can neatly into the trash in her hand, and without stopping, reminded them to be careful of bicycles on the track. She jogged past them as if nothing had happened, leaving both boys staring after her in visible shock. Chanyu, however, smiled as he watched her go, commenting lightly that she looked cool jogging while picking up trash, also known as plogging, and waved goodbye. Not long after, they all went their separate ways. Later that day, Sami stopped by the market. The vendor informed her that she had completed her coupon and could choose anything for free. Without hesitation, Sami asked for potatoes. The woman cheerfully offered her an entire sack, and Sami's face lit up with quiet joy as she accepted it. That night at home, Sami carefully boiled the potatoes and arranged them neatly on a plate. After eating, she portioned some into nylon bags to freeze for later use, satisfied with how much she could save. She then moved on to washing her gym pants by hand, scrubbing gently and cautiously. They were old and worn, but she was determined not to damage them. Her part-time boss had promised to give her her daughter's gym pants once she graduated, so she reminded herself that she only needed to hold on until then. Midway through washing, she suddenly paused. Her thoughts drifted to the image of Pyojun holding Chanyu earlier that day. The realization startled her, and she straightened up, looking almost offended at herself for even thinking about it. The following day at school, Chanyu stood outside with two girls who were proudly holding out a small necklace. He praised one of them for how well she had made it, and she explained that it had taken many attempts. The other added that she had stayed up all night helping. Chanyu smiled as he lifted the necklace to admire it, and the girls watched him eagerly, clearly basking in his attention. This effortless charm was something he carried naturally. Then his expression shifted slightly. One of the girls asked if he was feeling cold, but he denied it. Looking ahead, he noticed Sami approaching and immediately waved, calling out to her. Sami greeted him casually in return, while the two girls stared at her with barely concealed hostility. Chanyu asked Sami if she wanted to hang out with them, and the glares directed at her intensified, each one carrying its own unspoken message. Sami met their looks head-on, glaring back without hesitation. The girls flinched, caught off guard. Without another word, Sami turned and walked away. Chanyu called after her, sounding surprised that she would leave just like that, while the girls silently cursed her presence. Meanwhile, in the teacher's office, Sami and Pyojun stood side by side as the teacher thanked them sincerely for their help the previous day, praising them for doing an excellent job. He explained that instead of buying them drinks, he would send each of them a gift card for a convenience store. True to his word, he sent it immediately. As they walked back toward their classroom, Sami checked her phone again, mentally listing what she needed to buy, garbage bags being the most urgent. She slipped the phone back into her pocket and glanced at Pyojun, whose expression remained unreadable. Almost immediately, he called her name, making her flinch. He pulled out a roll of tape and explained that it must have accidentally flown into his bag earlier. Relief washed over her as she realized why he had called out to her so suddenly. As he moved to hand it over, the tape slipped from his grasp and fell to the floor. Both of them bent down at the same time to pick it up, but just then, someone called out to Pyojun. Sami's eyes widened as she recognized the voice. It was Chanyu. Chan approached them with a smile, and in that instant, a conclusion formed rapidly in Sami's mind. Kim Pyojun and Chanyu together. The thought struck her so forcefully that she jolted upright, hitting something hard in the process. Chan's expression changed instantly as he asked if they were both all right. Sami clutched her head in pain but quickly turned her attention to Pyojun, asking anxiously if he was okay. She had heard a sharp sound and feared the worst. When she looked closely at him, she froze. Pyojun was standing there, holding his nose, and blood was slowly seeping through his fingers. Outside the infirmary, Sami stood frozen in place, unable to move even an inch. After a long moment, she lifted a hand to her head, her expression lost and conflicted. She could not believe the mess she had caused simply by panicking. In the end, she wondered why it even mattered to her whether something was going on between the two of them or not. Just then, the infirmary door opened and Chanyu stepped out. He looked surprised to see her still standing there. Sami immediately asked about Pyojun, her voice tense as she wondered whether his nose had been broken. Chanyu blinked at the question, then explained that the nurse had said it was only a small cut. The bleeding had already stopped, and Pyojun was resting inside. Hearing that, Sami released a heavy sigh she hadn't realized she was holding. Chanyu chuckled lightly and asked about her forehead instead. She brushed it off, saying she was fine. Feeling uneasy, Sami began apologizing to him, which only confused Chanyu further. He pointed out that he was the one who had been hit, not her. She hesitated, almost bringing up the suspicion that had formed in her mind earlier, but stopped herself just in time. Chanyu noticed her hesitation and prompted her to continue, but she dismissed it, saying it was nothing. Already sensing what she had been thinking, he laughed softly and told her that she had the wrong idea. He explained that he and Pyojun were just friends and that they had been close since middle school. Sami could only stare at him as her thoughts spiraled. She realized that she might have jumped to conclusions after witnessing that single moment earlier. An apology rose to her lips, but before she could say anything, Chanyu continued speaking. Inside the infirmary, Pyojun lay quietly on the bed. After a while, he lifted his hand and examined it. The bruise that had once been there was already gone. Now it was his nose that throbbed. He touched it carefully, unable to deny that it stung quite badly. Outside, Chanyu admitted to Sami that Pyojun didn't return his feelings. Even so, he confessed calmly that he still liked him. A phone resting on a soft holder played a scene from a movie, showing a man confessing his feelings. The confession was directed at another man, As the listener was about to respond, the confessor stopped him, explaining that he already knew they were not the same. Unexpectedly, the other man reached out and placed a hand on his shoulder, insisting that they were not so different after all. The sudden response left the confessor shouting in disbelief. Sami, who was watching the scene while folding her clothes, froze. Her hands paused mid-motion as she stared at the screen. Resting her chin on her hand, she unconsciously imagined a similar moment, one where Pyojin stood before Chanyu, telling him that they were alike. The thought startled her. She shook her head sharply, scolding herself inwardly. There was still so much left to do. She had no business letting her thoughts wander like that. She hurriedly finished folding the clothes, stood up, and gathered the trash. Taking it outside, she carefully sorted and disposed of the recyclables the way they were meant to be. Once she was done, she dusted her hands together in quiet satisfaction. Clearing everything out made her feel lighter, as if a weight had been lifted from her mind. She resolved not to let things pile up like that again. Just as she was about to step back into her apartment, a dog suddenly dashed past her and ran straight inside. Startled, she jumped aside, confused about where the dog had come from. Moments later, she heard someone calling out urgently for a dog named Rarang to stop. Turning around, she saw Chanyu approaching, slightly out of breath. He asked if she had seen a white dog by that name. She pointed toward her apartment, and he immediately asked if he could step inside for a moment. She allowed him in without hesitation. Inside the apartment, Rarang was nowhere to be seen at first. Chanyu said he would search briefly, and Sami casually told him to go ahead. After checking around, he finally spotted the dog peeking through a doorway. He scooped Rarang up, apologizing to him before asking the dog to apologize to her as well. Sami waved it off, saying it was fine and adding that she liked dogs. Chanyu then asked if she lived alone. The question made her expression tighten. Noticing the shift, he laughed awkwardly and apologized, admitting that he kept overstepping his boundaries. To his surprise, Sami answered anyway. She stated plainly that she did live alone, then added that her parents had passed away. The honesty caught him off guard, and for a moment, he didn't know how to respond. Elsewhere, a woman stared at her phone, murmuring that it had already been a year. Nearby, Sami's uncle poured himself a glass of wine. The woman asked whether Sami would attend her parents' memorial service, since it was the first one. He didn't respond. With a sigh, she remarked that as her uncle, he was the only one who seemed indifferent about her leaving. The next day at school, Pyojin sat quietly at his desk when Sami approached him and examined his face closely. With her hands folded behind her back, she asked if his nose might bleed again. He assured her that it wouldn't. She pressed further, asking whether it hurt when he touched it, and he told her it didn't. Without another word, she placed an orange on his desk and told him to eat it, explaining that vitamin C was good for nosebleeds and minor injuries. Surprised by the gesture, he listened as she added that he should let her know if anything felt off. Later, at the basketball court, Pyojin was peeling the orange when Chanyu approached and casually asked whether he always carried oranges around. Pyojin denied it and explained that Sami had given it to him. Chanyu fell silent, his thoughts drifting back to Sami's quiet confession about living alone and losing her parents. Pyojin's voice pulled him back as he offered him a slice of the orange. Chanyu refused at first, looking away. Pyojin insisted, saying it was sweet, but Chan continued to decline. Without warning, Pyojin hooked an arm around his neck and shoved a slice into his mouth. Chan protested, telling him to stop while Pyojin laughed. After chewing, Chan's face flushed. He had to admit it. It was sweet. That night, Sami walked home, exhausted after a long day of work. She wondered if she had been pushing herself too hard because of the advance she had received. As she yawned, her phone vibrated with a message from her uncle. The message was brief, telling her to come for her parents' memorial service. There was no greeting, no concern, just the instruction. She paused on the sidewalk, staring at the screen for a moment before slipping the phone into her pocket. Pulling out her earpiece, she plugged it in and continued walking, lost in her thoughts. Still distracted, she didn't notice when someone suddenly grabbed her from behind. She turned in alarm to see Pyojin, breathing heavily. After catching his breath, he told her she had been about to cross at a red light. She looked up, realizing he was right. Seeing the red light made Sami flustered. She bent down instinctively, hiding her face in her knees. Pyojin, noticing her reaction, asked if she was all right. Irritated at herself, she yanked out her earpiece and admitted that she knew it was dangerous. Standing up with quiet determination, she emphasized that she understood the risks of wearing earphones while crossing the street, and thanked Pyojun, who hadn't expected her reaction. As they stood side by side on the road, Pyojun asked her if it was a cassette player she had been using. She confirmed that it was, surprised that he even knew what it was. He asked if she was listening to Seungwon Lee, and she looked at him blankly, not recognizing the name. They turned to face forward again, and she sighed. Clearly, he didn't understand what it was. Later that evening at home, Pyojun had dinner with his father. His father asked if this week was the one he was supposed to visit his mother, and when Pyojun confirmed, he was reminded not to disappoint her as he had previously. She had believed that Pyojun had deliberately skipped his visit because he had asked him to, and his father didn't want history to repeat itself. After dinner, Pyojun retreated to his room, phone in hand. He composed a message to his mother, explaining that he would not be able to come and asking her not to inform his father. He stared at it for a long moment before sending it and lazily dropping the phone onto the table. Leaning back in his chair, his thoughts drifted elsewhere, and he picked up the phone again to search for Seungwon Lee. Meanwhile, at Sammy's apartment, she meticulously worked on her cassette player. She had loosened the screws and was carefully trying to untangle the tape, fully absorbed in the task. Using her pencil, she slowly rolled the tape back onto the reel, hoping the tangled section hadn't been damaged. When she finally attempted to play it, she noticed that some parts sounded scratchy. Frustrated, she let out a small cry of sadness and lowered her head, realizing that the cassette had been a keepsake from her mother. At Pyojun's place, he had found the music he wanted, put on his headset, and sent a text to Sammy. The next morning, Chan-yu woke lazily, yawning. As he headed to the bathroom, his mother entered and asked if he was just waking up. When he confirmed, she warned him that he would be late. She added that the student next door left at dawn every day and even swept the front of the building before school. Chan-yu's eyes widened as he listened, his attention fully captured. She wondered aloud if the girl lived alone, having never seen anyone else in the building, and Chan-yu looked away silently. Later, as Chan-yu walked toward school, he noticed Sammy ahead, arguing with a man while defending a younger schoolgirl. Seeing the tension rise, the girl tried to reassure Sammy that she was fine. Sammy bent down to her, scolding her gently about wasting her allowance and encouraging her to be confident in expressing her grievances. Turning to the man, Sammy calmly demanded that he refund the girl, insisting that he could trust her judgment. When he questioned how he could trust her, a voice from behind vouched for her. Sammy looked over to see Chan-yu standing there, and he had a faint smile on his face. Surprised, she watched as the man reluctantly refunded the girl and left, bowing in gratitude to Sammy. She smiled, pleased that the girl had gotten her money back, and Chan-yu warned her to be careful on her way to school. As they walked together, Chan-yu mentioned that his mother had seen her leave at dawn, asking if she had been outside the entire time. He just laughed, saying that he knew she had been plogging. They passed by the woman who had given Sammy potatoes before, who waved and asked if she was heading to school and if the boy beside her was her boyfriend. Sammy immediately replied no. Another seller greeted her and asked if she had eaten breakfast, then asked again if the boy was her boyfriend. Once again, she said no. As they continued, she received greetings from other vendors, and soon they both held an orange in their hands. Chan-yu looked at it in surprise, noting how popular she seemed, and she downplayed it, quietly thinking about giving the orange to Pyojun. Later, Sammy was learning about yellow flowers with the groundskeeper, who explained that they were a symbol for fruit. He handed her one to try and encouraged her to make it bloom herself. Sammy's face lit up with excitement as she carefully worked on it. Pyojun and Chan-yu passed by, and Chan-yu wondered aloud what she was doing with the groundskeeper. Watching her jump in excitement and see the groundskeeper clap, he remarked that she seemed strong even in difficult situations. Realizing he had said too much, he quickly tried to clarify that he only meant that she appeared resilient because he observed her often, not because he knew something secret about her. Pyojun just turned to him slowly, and he nervously said Sammy looked that way to him, and asked if it looked cheesy. Pyojun told him that he never said anything. They both stared at each other blankly before Chan-yu looked away, saying that he could see it in Pyojun's eyes that he wanted to make a joke out of it, and Pyojun told him that he didn't want to. He looked away again. Feeling Pyojun's gaze on him, Chan-yu's face slowly turned red, asking him not to look at him in that manner. Pyojin remained stoic, not reacting. Chanyu looked towards him and asked Pyojin with a squeal not to stare at him, but Pyojin only laughed. They both looked back at Sami and the groundskeeper, still absorbed in their work, determined to succeed. Meanwhile, a stretcher released a thick plume of smoke in class. The bullies standing around whispered to each other, wondering what was happening. One suggested testing it on her hair, but the other refused, pointing out her hair was in a bun. Just then, Sami approached the classroom and the bullies thought she looked perfect. The girl in the middle stepped forward, smirking at Sami, and the others whispered among themselves about what to do with her curly hair. The girl with the straightener insisted that it would look good on her and asked Sami for permission, while the others laughed, claiming Sami had no choice. One of the bullies grabbed Sami's hair and pulled her closer, warning her sarcastically not to move or else she would get hurt. Just as the straightener was about to touch her hair, a voice called out sharply, telling them to move. Sami looked up to see who it was. And that's where we'll pause for now. Yes, I know. I didn't want it to end also. If you want to see what happens next, let me know in the comments and I'll bring part 2 as soon as possible. For those asking, the title of the manhwa is Press Play Sami, and I covered up to chapter 8. Make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss the next upload when it goes live. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next recap.